Welcome to the Principal Podcast, where we talk about how the best professional services firms grow. Whether you're looking to scale your firm or learn from the stories of founders and leaders who've done it, you're in the right place. Join us as we interview the best leaders in professional services. Let's get on with the show. Pat, welcome to the Principal Podcast. Happy to have you.
I'm fired up to be here, man. Let's do it.
Oh, let's do it. And let's start with the beginning. What's the story, Pat? What got you into consulting and ultimately convinced you that there was an opportunity to build a completely different model for delivering them?
Yeah. So I went into consulting after college because honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went to MIT. I changed my major a couple of times. I was having a hard time figuring out like how I wanted to have impact in the world. And consulting was a good direction to go in because consulting, you get to learn about a lot of other businesses. You get to spend time with smart people and solve problems. I didn't know a ton about it, but it seemed like a good path as I continued to learn and figure out where I wanted to really be when I grew up. And so I went and worked at a big consulting firm. And I remember the first time that I was staffed on a project. I got my staffing and I went to my manager and I said, "Hey, I think you made a mistake. I don't know anything about this business or this industry or the problem. Like, I'm not the right person for this project." And my manager was like, no, that's how it works. We're going to like you and nobody else on your team will have done this before either, but we're going to give you our frameworks. You'll be able to leverage deliverables we've given to other similar problems, other different businesses. And that's how consulting works. And so from the get-go, I was actually really surprised by the model. And there were cases where I felt like consulting firms were a good answer to do something quickly at like high capacity that a business needed. But honestly, the majority of the time when I was at this firm, I felt like, the companies would have been much, much better off if they could have just found the individual or small team of people who had actually done this work before. And then I left. I actually didn't enjoy my experience there because I felt bad about the way that we were delivering work. And so I went to a very small consulting firm called Vantage Partners. And Vantage Partners is really interesting. Vantage was started by the people who wrote the book Getting to Yes, which is one of the best-selling business books of all time. They started something at Harvard called the Harvard Program on Negotiation. They did through that a lot of really, really impactful conflict and negotiation work. And so they were involved in the apartheid negotiations, the Iran hostage situation, auto workers strike, like all sorts of these like high-profile negotiation and conflict situations. And then they decided to build a corporate consulting practice that would help them take a lot of the same lessons from Getting to Yes and the frameworks that they built and bring it to the corporate world. And so there, it was an amazing experience because it was a small number of partners. All of them were exceptional. I would get involved, small number of consultants, maybe 10 consultants on the team. I could get involved in selling and delivery and learn a lot from the partners who are incredible. And the thing that was so interesting was we would sometimes be pitching work and we'd be talking to the VP at the client. And the VP would be saying to us, I really hope you guys win. The other firm that is pitching on this is, McKinsey, Deloitte, whoever. And, your cost is substantially lower. I'm pretty convinced you'd deliver a better outcome. I'm the one who's going to be working with you. But at the end of the day, my SVP has a really good relationship with the partner at McKinsey or the partner at Deloitte. And so I don't know which way this is going to go. And to me, that felt like so ludicrous because, these people had literally written the book. They were exceptional at what they did. I was convinced that any consulting firm who was going to beat Vantage on the work would go to Vantage's website after they won and download all their material so they could learn how to do it. And, and like a pretty specific type of work. And Vantage would sometimes not win. And so to me, it was just this like outrageous, man, why are people buying the brand? This isn't how the world should work. And so that was kind of like how I left it. And then I went to business school. And I went to Harvard Business School. And in the first year program, they had instituted something that they call Field. And the whole idea of Field at HBS is to help people have more experiential learning, like get you into the field to like experience, what it's like to be an executive in the world or to try and start a company in the world. And Field had three parts. Part one was more introspective. Part two was more about you'd go to an emerging economy and launch a business with a company. So like I went to Johannesburg and helped a company launch a product. Field three was you had to start a company, and they put everybody, 920 first-year students into teams of 6, gave every team, $5,000, and you had to go start a business. And I had this idea in my head of, I'm surrounded by all these people who have worked on specific things prior to coming to HBS. What if we could connect companies to those individuals to solve the problem instead of a big consulting firm? And it seemed so logical to me. And then one of my co-founders his father ran a small business in New York, and he would always talk about how it's so hard with this small business to be able to find people who could do things, and the consulting budget is too high. And so between the two, we merged this concept of we would use technology to make it easy to identify the best consultants, independent consultants in the world, make it really easy for them to sign up, for us to understand what their skills are. And then when a company had a problem, we'd connect the person or small team who'd solved it before. And we'd use technology to do this, which would allow us to do it in a really scalable way. That was the whole business. And day one of this Field 3 program, you had to go pitch your idea to another section at HBS. There's 10 sections, 92 students per section. And when we pitched our idea to this other section, a woman in the back row raised her hand and said, hey, we had the same idea for a business. We talked to 10 different businesses, and all 10 said they would never hire somebody like this instead of a consulting firm. What makes you think you could do it? And, I didn't have a good answer. I wanted to be like, maybe your market research sucks. I don't know. But maybe you had a really bad pitch. But I kind of fumbled over my words. And out of 150 teams at HBS, there was a virtual stock market afterwards. So you could buy or sell stocks in the companies after the pitch on day one. And after our pitch, there were 150 teams, and we came in 150th, dead last. It was brutal. And our ticker name, the company was originally called Hourly Nerd. Our ticker name was Nerd, N-E-R-D. So it was very obvious who we were. And we were like so damn determined that we were going to win this freaking competition. And we were told that the way to win was most revenue. And so we basically went and like hit the roads. Like we would go, we'd bring like a blazer to class at HBS. The second class ended, we'd walk across the river to Harvard Square. We'd take the T down to different parts of Boston, and we would walk into small businesses and cold call them. And by the end of Field 3, maybe there were $50,000 in revenue generated across all the HBS classes, 5 or 6 weeks later. And we were like 40,000 of it. And so we actually ended up coming in second place, which was total BS. And we don't have to go on that path. That's a whole other area. And I want to show that side of me fully. But we had a real business. And so from there, we were off and running while we were students in B school.
Love it. That is quite the backstory, Pat. So all this leading to what? What is the problem that you solve today?
Same core problem, but we do it at a much, much larger scale, which is that when companies are facing problems, traditional consulting firms are more often than not a good solution. If you think about like anything that's related to implementation or operational types of work, consulting firms aren't designed to do that. They're largely designed to do strategy work. And if you look at the consulting teams that you receive, they are by and large similar to what I was a part of. They're very, very smart people. They're great people for the most part. They are, 25-year-olds who go sit in a conference room inside of your office. They interview people who work at your company. They take frameworks that are not designed for your company. They're designed for, similar problems and delivering at scale. And the majority of what you're getting is done by somebody who has no experience solving your actual problem. That is not a good answer. There's a better answer. And a better answer is find the individual or the team of people who have actually solved this problem before, who have been inside of a company and they know what it takes to drive change. They know what it takes to really, truly design a new process that is achievable. They know what it takes to take a new product to market and all of the different things that you might miss along the way. The people who have lived it, who have been in your shoes, that is a better answer. And to bring them in a flexible way, not some pre-structured size of a consulting team because a consulting firm has utilization goals that they have to hit, but instead a team that's designed based on your problem and nothing else. That's a better answer. And that's a possible thing to do when there are so many talented people who today have left their jobs at big consulting firms or as operators to start their own independent consulting practice. And so that is on the client side what we do. On the consultant side, very similarly, we have a role to play to help the world's best independent consultants be incredibly successful at what they do. Part of that is giving them access to these opportunities, but a huge part of that is giving them the tools that they need to succeed. Independent consultants shouldn't have to spend half their time dealing with setting up their legal entity, handling their bookkeeping, their accounting, their taxes, their banking, independent consultants typically don't have access to junior analysts. Good news is AI is replacing all of that work. AI is effectively replacing what 75% of people at a traditional firm do. We have built tools using AI that our consultants can use as if they have an army of analysts in their pocket every single day. And so we can be the best partner to every independent consultant in the world, which lets them focus on what they're amazing at and translates into incredible value for our customers.
So that's interesting. I was going to ask you, who is it that you're helping? So it's not so much the corporations who would be facing problems anymore. It's actually the consultants, more like small boutique consulting firms, helping those corporations. So is this who you're helping now? Like, what's the model?
Yeah, we're really a platform. So our business model is mostly designed around helping the client. So we work with close to half of the Fortune 500. We work with private equity-backed portfolio companies, primarily working, though, through the private equity firm. And then increasingly, a lot of the work we do with private equity firms is actually also for the firm on the deal side or on the operation side for the PE firm. That's our business. We make sure that they always have the best solutions to the problems that they have. A core part of the best solutions is the right specific team or individual consultant that can help them solve their problem because they've done it before. But we also need to be able to provide the infrastructure and tools for those consultants to deliver it effectively. Very much the same way that a traditional consulting firm does. But our business model design is designed for a world with AI, and it's designed for a world with the customer value front and center, not a leverage business model.
So it's interesting because it feels like a marketplace, to put it in like, or a connector.
But in some respects, yeah.
What has worked for you, Pat, especially in this transition to build that brand, build that awareness, get the interest of people? I'm not talking about sales just yet, and maybe we can talk about where you are right now. I guess is part of the answer. But what has worked for you to get the attention of those PE firms, those deal partners, the consulting firms as well who want to use the platform, because those are quite different avatars as well. So wrapping up the question here.
Yeah.
What is working for you marketing-wise to get the attention of those people?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is on the consultant side, we don't spend $1 to attract consultants, and we get close to 1,000 consultants who apply to join our community every month. We get 15 partners from Bain, McKinsey, and BCG who apply to join our community every month. We get people who have been executives at the Fortune 500 or at PE-backed companies. We don't do anything to get them. We are by far the largest player in this space, and the word of mouth gets around all of the different ways that we can support independent consultants. And so that drives the consultant side. There's a lot of work we're doing where we want to be able to create standalone value for consultants so they can have tools they can use on all of the work they're doing, not just on Catalant clients. And so that's a big, big area of investment right now that we've got some stuff that we're actually just rolling out. So, there we have it because it is through word of mouth, because of the brand that we built, the fact that we have exceptionally interesting projects for people to have really serious impact, make a living. We have people who make over $1 million a year as consultants in our community. And we have a incredibly good support infrastructure and team to be able to help them do it. That's a big one. Increasingly though, we do continue to think about how do we treat the consultants as if they're, very close to our team members. We want them to feel like we and they are on the same team. On the client side, it's a little trickier. We have really two big parts of our business. We have enterprise and we have private equity. Private equity side, we have very, very good brand awareness. We have good brand awareness because we deliver exceptional work. Like that's oftentimes one of the biggest things. And within the private equity space, it's a pretty small world. We work through the operating partners, primarily at the large cap, but increasingly at a lot of the middle market. And those operating partners all know each other. I'm currently at a conference. I'm normally never wearing a collared shirt. I am always wearing a hoodie. So this is like, you're catching me at a pretty atypical look for me, but I look like you. I look almost half as good as you do right now. So I'm trying. So the private equity world is small. And so tons of word of mouth. Like our brand awareness is really high in private equity. And as we change and evolve our model, it continues to really fit well with everything that they're doing. So that's going really well. On the enterprise side, it's a little different, but we do have more of a key account strategy across the business, but enterprise, it's really relevant. where we deliver really good work within an account or within one client, and then we see a ton of growth within the account. So one of the biggest metrics for us is net revenue retention. We think about largely because that measure of the value we're delivering. And we have very, very high net revenue retention within enterprise accounts, and it is 100% because of quality of the outcomes delivered.
Talk to me about how you tie all this to this revenue. So before they become, net recurring revenue, how do you move a conversation from this brand awareness, from those people trying to join the platform, and on the enterprise and smaller businesses side, how do you go from all this awareness to a conversation, a sales conversation, an SOW, letter of engagement? Do you get into a conversation at all at some point, actually, Pat, or do you connect the customers directly with the consultants that are the best match? How does it work?
Great question. So, I mean, a big part, the brand awareness piece is we refer to what we do as Consulting 2.0, which we think is really good definition of where we are in the market. We're redefining the way consulting happens. We get incredibly good access to clients, enterprise and private equity side. People are very, very big believers in the general model that we have. And so getting access to executives is pretty easy. I think everybody is well aware now of what some of the issues are with the traditional consulting model. You can read an article in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, wherever, almost once a week, that talks about a problem with traditional consulting. You can see the rates that they charge on the GSA schedule, the government site. You can see that some of the best people who worked at those firms are leaving because they don't really know what's going to happen in a world with AI. And so access is pretty darn easy. The hardest thing is getting people comfortable with a model that's different because, people inherently tend to be risk averse when they're working on something that's big and important. And so that's a big focus for us, but we do go in person. We spend a lot of time with our clients. We really view the consultants as part of our team when we do that. So we'll bring consultants into those conversations as early as we can. And oftentimes our clients can't tell the difference. Like they can't tell who's a Catalant employee and who's a consultant from our community because we know them so well and we show up as one team. Every consulting firm, as you well know, every consulting firm uses contractors. We have a lot of consulting firms who are clients, but pretty much every consulting firm uses contractors. They just don't tell you. And so for us, like there is, we're more transparent about it, but that's the whole business model. But it feels riskier than it is. And so a lot of what we want to do is just spend enough time with clients to help them understand why this is not risky and they're going to get a lot of value from it. And by the way, when something costs half the cost of the other model, they tend to listen.
So I feel so 100%. The back to the anecdotes from the beginning. That is, obviously you're building the brand, and I feel you're getting more and more established. And the fact that the MBBs and the Big Fours are coming to your platform is a proof of that. To go back to your initial anecdote around why would they go with Variant Partners? Was that the name of the firm that you were?
Firm that we had, yeah.
Right. But the SVP has a relationship with McKinsey. Yep. It's the unfortunate but famous, nobody gets fired for hiring IBM. Same goes for McKinsey, BCG, and Bain. But all the conversations that I'm having right now are around, the future is for smaller, leaner, AI-powered boutique consulting firms.
Totally.
But the MBBs are not, they're also there because they know what they're doing. So we see them adapting. We see them going to maybe smaller companies with a bit of a different approach. So of course they won't die easily, if at all. But it's an interesting time for consulting for sure. Talk to me about the most important metric for you, retention. How do you make that happen? How do you ensure that you don't make the most out of each and every client, but you find the next problem and solve it, and the next problem and solve it, and keep on bringing that value so that you have strong stickiness? How do you go about that?
Most important thing, and I'm sure you hear the same thing from consulting firms, but most important thing is building really strong, trusting relationships and delivering really good value. Our what's interesting about our model, and we get a lot of feedback, there's kind of two things that clients will call out when they use our model that makes it feel so different than a consulting firm. The first thing is that the consultants feel embedded. That word is used a lot, actually. And the reason is because when you hire a traditional consulting firm, those consultants are, as I mentioned before, they're in a conference room down the hallway. They give you an update on some predetermined cadence. They don't let, the 25-year-old version of me out of the conference room to go talk to the head of supply chain or whoever, because I wouldn't have been able to do that effectively. They have to run it up the flagpole internally and then put together a well-controlled presentation when they give you an update on the engagement. Our consultants, on the other hand, are sitting alongside the client. There is no independent consultant that's successful at what they do who doesn't have 10 plus years of experience, and the majority on Catalant have 20 plus. These are people who want to get their hands dirty because they love solving problems, but they can sit alongside the client, and there's a lot of value there. There's a lot of value there because you get to better solutions when it's iterative. There's a lot of value there because when you can bring the client along through the entire process at that level of detail, change management is a heck of a lot easier, and people understand why the solution is what it is and how you're going to actually implement it effectively. It's just a better approach. So embedded is one key thing we get. And so once a client tries us, they always will continue to use us because that experience is really key. But the other big thing is that you're just making sure that you deliver a ton of value. And the other big difference with consulting firms that they always call out is that we're not selling the entire time alongside the project. And that's because the person who is doing the work is just excited to be able to have won and had the opportunity to do this work. There isn't a person sitting in your organization who is like trying to sell you consulting all the time. That's just not our model. That's not what we do. We're not sitting there trying to expand this into something that it doesn't need to turn into. It just isn't how it works. And so sometimes that hurts us because, I can give you countless occasions where a partner from, BCG or wherever is just sitting outside the conference room that the client is in every day because they've got a badge in their building and they're just waiting to be able to sell you the next thing. We hear that from clients a lot. And even though clients know that's happening and they really dislike it, they all fall victim to it. Whereas that's not our model. We're not like sitting outside looking through your office window, waiting to see if you're ready to sign the next contract. Not our model, but it aligns. Our incentives are so much more aligned to the consultant, to the client. The consultant gets feedback at the end of the engagement. If that feedback doesn't go well, they're going to have a hell of a time winning more opportunities. And we're going to be partnering alongside them to make sure it goes well. It's just like the incentive alignment is completely different.
I like your style, Pat. So I'm gonna ask you a curveball question to make a bit up for it.
Yeah.
What is Catalan biggest challenge right now? Like, what is the one that your guys are trying to crack that, once you crack, you're going to take the whole thing to the next level? What would that be?
The single biggest challenge is getting companies comfortable with a model that's different completely. I mentioned it before, but the reality is this feels like a different model than what they're used to. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. Like we've made this transition from more of a marketplace model, which is what we really were up until really it was when the interest rates rose that we were able to go and compete more directly with big firms, which wouldn't surprise you. That's when big consulting firms started to have a lot more pressure because people started to question the ROI. And prior to that, they hadn't really done, even during COVID, they kind of leaned more heavily into consulting firms during COVID because it was like the unknown. Interest rates went up. CFO has more power to push on spend. And guess what is a massive, in most cases, $1 billion plus line item in a Fortune 500? Professional services. And that's where we can step in. But the hardest thing about that is then changing what our model is and being able to show up to a client in a way where they understand our model and they feel like they can completely trust it. So there's a lot of things we're doing around that. We're changing the way that we think about doing contracting. We certainly have cases where we're pricing to value achieved. And one of the nice things is because we have a platform approach to all this, we have like exceptionally good data on the problems our customers are trying to solve, what it takes to solve them right, what kind of consultants are best suited to do it, how the work's most effectively delivered to get you to a high ROI. And the more data we have around that, the easier it is for us to do things that are very much, fees at risk or based on outcome. And so I think that's one way. Another is, continuing. We've really invested in the past 2 years at moving away from more of a marketplace or network model to one where we have a large number of trusted consultants who we know incredibly well, and we partner with them really closely. And we partner with them on a lot of things. I mentioned some earlier, but we'll have them, we do events with them. I was at an event last night with consultants, and we call it our practice community, the consultants who we know really well. I was at an event last night in San Francisco with a bunch of them. We organize our practice community by centers of excellence, and we get those centers of excellences together to be able to build capability themselves, share best practices, build out, frameworks and solutions that we can take to customers to be able to help them engage, firms and models like ours better. We train them on how to do different things. So we train them on how to use AI. We give them access to our enterprise version of LLMs to make sure that they've got access to all the best LLMs in the world. Something that I was surprised to hear, maybe you wouldn't be. Most of the large consulting firms are not letting the consultants within those firms use all of the LLMs. I was with some folks from a big firm recently, and they talked about how the only tool they have access to is Copilot. And these are the same people who are trying to advise executives on how to leverage AI inside their companies. That does not sound like they are set up to be successful and deliver value to their customers. So, we're trying to solve all these things in really effective ways. At the end of the day, if we can show up and feel like one cohesive solution to our client, that helps. The other, though, is you build it up by just earning your credibility. I think a lot about you earn credibility and you earn trust by doing really good work, being honest, and delivering.
You have a huge network effect. So it's interesting because the time you spent answering this answer was mainly how do we get more consultants onto the platform? How do we get them exceptional so that it becomes the obvious choice to companies who want to explore this?
Yep.
Which makes 100% sense. And it is a challenge, so I don't expect you to have all the answers, but I'm a bit curious about how you're thinking about the other side, right? So on the company side, what are you guys thinking about when it comes to getting the decision makers, the SVPs who have relationships with the McKinseys, to think, guys, this is worth exploring? And yes, relationships are important. Actually, it's at the foundation of all things consulting, right? Also in retention, you mentioned it. But we need to look into this as well. How are you guys thinking about that?
Cases of success are really key. Certainly being able to tell stories about other impact that we've had. I would actually say that the place that we have seen that's changing really fast is on AI transformation. So this is I think it's actually a really good example of the challenge for a traditional firm relative to a model like ours. And we're seeing that challenge is pretty exacerbated. And let me explain. A lot of our clients, particularly in the enterprise side, have gone through the process of hiring a traditional firm to help them on AI transformation. We all know that the traditional firms are not filled with people with specific, deep domain expertise. They're not filled with people who have worked inside of enterprises before to drive change. And they're definitely not filled with people who understand AI and what it takes to implement it. Historically, for large consulting firms, that hasn't been an issue because the pace at which they can introduce new solutions and build their frameworks is pretty measured. They can go in and they learn from clients. We know that. They learn from client engagements on how they're going to build their frameworks. The problem with AI is they cannot be measured. They have to show up and deliver. And so much of the bookings at the big traditional consulting firms, you see this for the public ones, so much of their bookings are based on AI transformation, and they are not converting to revenue at the pace that their historical bookings have because they are failing to deliver. They're failing to deliver because they don't know how to do it. And the only way to deliver AI transformation, you've got to start with an understanding of where can AI generate true measurable value in your business, and then back up from there. So maybe you've identified that you can generate more revenue because you're going to expand distribution. Great. Do you now have somebody who's had to go through the process of designing what distribution looks like at a company like this in this industry, and who can say, okay, if we embed AI in this, we're going to completely have to change our distribution processes and strategy so that AI is now a part of it? Because if you don't, you're not going to do it well. Then if you can define that, you can say, great, how do we design the work that has to happen for us to redesign our distribution process and strategy? And then, and only then, can you implement the AI to do it. If you try and do it any other way, it will fail. And if you don't have true domain expertise in the work, it's not going to happen. And so we are seeing that, I have not found a case. I talked to a lot of companies, private equity, enterprise side. I have not heard a case where they are happy with what they are getting from a traditional consulting firm on AI transformation. And I'm 0% surprised because it isn't what they're designed to be able to do. You can't use a leverage model to do this. You just can't. That's what we're seeing though, is we are getting pulled into these opportunities a lot. We've gone from basically a year ago, might as well have rounded to 0% of our work was focused on AI to close to half right now is AI transformation work. It might be transformation of the way you do pricing, or it might be a broader transformation effort. It might be related to an integration. It might be related to total changes in like go-to-market, supply chain, whatever. Supply chain is a huge opportunity for AI, but that is becoming the majority of what we do. And I think by the end of this year, it could be close to 100% because it's the most important thing for companies. But the reality is it requires functional expertise. It requires people who know how to operate. It's not going to work if you don't have that. And so I actually think this is probably our best opportunity to go and really drive impact inside of our clients. And again, to me, it's all about delivering really good work. If we deliver a ton of value to our clients, if they feel like every time they work with Catalant, they get 10x what they paid for it, and that's really what we target, then we're going to be fine. We're going to break through. We're going to be able to prove our credibility, and we're going to grow damn fast. It's also what's giving us access to CEO conversations, I've noticed. The other thing that we do, which I think is actually really powerful, and I think AI transformation is what companies need most right now. The faster you do it, the bigger your advantage will be, and we're better positioned than anybody to do it. But the other interesting thing is when I talk to a client and they're thinking about bringing on a consulting firm instead of us, and it's not in AI transformation, it's in any, name your category. One of the things that I always say, and what I truly believe, is you should start with one person who's done this before. You should not start with a team of consultants. And if you bring on one Catalant person who's actually done this before at this level, maybe in a month you decide you do want to bring on that traditional consulting firm. That's fine. But man, how often does the scope change in the first month of a project? Like almost 100% of the time. If not 100%, it should be 100%, because the second that you start doing the work, you learn new things. Start with one person who's done this. Only scale up the team with the right people based on what the problem really is. Yes, if you hire a consulting firm, there is no like design the right people, because they're going to give you they're going to give you whoever's on the bench and needs to be utilized. But take the right approach based on the right point in time. And for us, I think it almost never makes sense to start with more than one person. So that actually resonates quite well too. It's an easy way for somebody to engage, and the cost of bringing on somebody from Catalant is like such a drop in the bucket. It's close to the expenses that you pay for the junior team of consultants to stay at the nice hotel around the road and eat nice dinners.
Pat Petitti, ladies and gentlemen. Pat, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
They can go to Catalant.com if they want to learn about Catalant. They can find me on LinkedIn, just Patrick Petitti. And if you have any questions you want to talk directly, my email is just P-A-T, @gocatalant.com.
Bold move. We'll put all the links in the description. But
Thank
you so much for coming on the Principal Podcast.
Thanks a ton for having me. This is a ton of fun, man.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Principal Podcast. We hope you've learned valuable lessons and strategies to grow your firm and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.